join me as we welcome this expert speaker in a discussion about everything we need to know with regards to the IQBBA Certified Foundation Level Business Analyst. With around 16 years of involvement in IT projects as a developer, tester, and test manager, the chair of the ISTQB Foundation Level WG, Riou du Cosquer, is now operating on large IT projects in order to contribute concretely to their success by ensuring that the QA and test activities are professionally managed and implemented at all levels by stakeholders. I hand over to Riou du Cosquer for his presentation. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you very much for this introduction, and congratulations for pronouncing my weird name very, very correctly. It's not an easy one. So thank you very much to A4Q for organizing this event. I'm really glad to be with you, remotely, but with you. So I'm speaking from Morocco, Marrakesh, and today I'll be talking, as you said, about business analysis and IQBBA at the end of my presentation. So to briefly introduce myself, I think the most important was already said. So I work in the field of software quality and testing for about 20 years now. So I know quite well different certification schemes such as IQBBA, IREB, ISTQB. And I also need money to feed my family. So I work for a small company called Certilog, also in the field of software quality and testing. And I'm also a lead assessor with TMMI, which is a way to assess the efficiency of test organization. What about you? So I'm not going to go around the table because we don't have much time. And if nobody is listening to me, I will feel a little bit uncomfortable. But I guess most of you are business analysts, product owner, project manager, scrum masters, test manager, testers, or software quality or testing consultant. So today, as I told you, it's going to be about business analysis. I will try to give you some advice about tools, about methods, and also about the certification you may try to do in the field of business analysis. Okay, just do I have to move the slides by myself or? Okay, so you can go to the next one, the one with today. Yes. Okay. Yes, please. And next one. Perfect. So I'm going to start with sad news, which is known by everyone. Many IT projects failed today. And it's not 100%, but it's close to 85% of projects failing for different reasons. And failing, what does it mean? It means that it's either a big issue of time, so the project is very late. It may be a money-related issue. So sometimes the budget at the end is twice or even more what was scheduled at the beginning. And very often it's an issue about quality. It doesn't work, or it works, but it doesn't provide the expected features. So why do we have so many? Who is guilty? We often try to identify someone to blame in the field of project. So I'm sure you know this picture. Yeah, you can move to that. Yes, I guess you all know this picture, but I don't like it because if you follow this picture, it's like everyone is totally stupid on the project. The customer is stupid, the business analyst is stupid, the project manager is stupid, everyone is stupid. I don't like it, and I don't want to elaborate too much on it. I think it should be enough to have like 3 pictures like this to show the main issues occurring at the beginning of the project. And for me, the main issues are 2 gaps that we unfortunately often have at the beginning of the project. The first one is the gap between the real needs. Yeah, can move to the, yes, gaps between the real needs. Can you move to the next one? Yes, perfect. Gaps between real needs and the needs expressed by the customer. It's a bit like the customer is asking something, but he doesn't really know what he needs. Another gap, which is very problematic, is the gap between the needs expressed by the customer. So the customer will be asking something, but it's not going to be properly understood by the business analyst or by the project manager in front of him. So for me, that's really the two major issues: gaps between the real needs, the needs expressed, and the needs understood by the IT project stakeholders. So what to do? What to do about this? Firstly, I will start with an advice that was given by one of my teachers when I was in my computer science school 20 years ago. The advice was, guys, you have to explicit the implicit. And it's not an easy thing. What is explicit? Explicit is stated, it's clearly defined. What is implicit? Implicit is something that is so obvious for the customer, for example, that the customer is not even going to talk about it. Okay, move to next. And it's very, very tricky because the implicit things, the implicit requirements are often the most important ones. It's so obvious that it's going to be necessary that it's not even asked to the project stakeholders. I don't know if you know the Kano model. Yes. Yeah, so the Kano model is a way to represent three types of requirements or three types of expected features. And this is represented in a diagram with 2 dimensions. If you have a look at the vertical axis, it's going from a low satisfaction level to a very high satisfaction. And if you have a look on the horizontal axis, it's about the quality of the implementation. So if we have a look at the basic factors or basic feature, it really corresponds to what I call implicit. So let's have a look at the green arrow on the picture. If you have a look on the left, you will see that if the basic factors are not correctly implemented, the customer will be extremely unhappy. You will make him very, very angry. But the tricky thing is that if it's perfectly implemented, you will be on the right with an excellent level of quality, a very good implementation, but it's not going to make the customer happy. It's normal, it's basic, it works well, it's normal. So what I think we have to keep in mind is that it's very, very important to try to explicit the implicit, and there are many, many BA techniques to do this. It's called requirements elicitation, such as interviews, document analysis, and so on. So I guess you all would like to know a method applicable on any project, and a method that would guarantee the success of the project, 100% success guaranteed with a specific method. And when I started BA training, I always ask to the delegates their expectations regarding the training. And very often I'm told something like, well, I come to this training to learn a method applicable in my context, in my company, and ensuring the success of all the projects I have to manage. Unfortunately, and we can move to the next picture, unfortunately, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. Each time you want to efficiently implement the business analysis activities, you have to adapt, you have to customize, you have to identify the tools that will add value in your context. So no way to have one single method applicable everywhere. So that's not good news, but the good news is that there are many, many, many tools available for the business analyst. And in my opinion, the best approach is to have like a toolbox of all these BA tools and to be able to use them when it's needed. Before I present some of these tools, I just would like to share with you a couple of examples based on my experience from different sectors: medical, public administration, bank, insurance, and so on. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first one, which is something that happened in a medical company. So I just need to move to the next slide. Okay, and so what happened? One day I was called by a lawyer who had to manage a lawsuit between a customer and their supplier. Actually, two public organizations had to merge and they were using two different softwares. So they had to create a new software based on the two legacy systems, based on the two existing softwares. And they knew that it would be very, very complicated from a business point of view, but also from a technical point of view. So at the beginning of the project, the customer agreed with their suppliers that it would not be possible to deliver the perfect solution after the first release. So they agreed to have 5 iterations, like we specify our needs, you develop, we test, you fix the defects, then you deliver again, and so on. But the problem was that after 9 iterations, there were still many, many critical defects in the software. So the customer decided to stop paying the supplier. The supplier, as you can imagine, was very, very unhappy and decided to start a lawsuit against the customer. And it took years, several years to find a decision. So I was involved on this, and what I had to answer to support the lawyer was questions as the one which are listed on this page. Does the customer raise real defects? Does the customer test too much? And the most important question, I think, was what were the commitments regarding the functional scope and the expected quality level of the final solution? And of course, to find these answers, you need to have some documentation. And unfortunately, as you can imagine, the documentation of this project was very, very low. It was a bit like we have two systems, they have to merge, and the final system has to be equivalent to the two previous systems. So what went wrong? I think the most important mistake of this project was that they wanted to go too fast at the beginning, and they had no documentation to build a requirements repository. So again, if you have skills in the field of business analysis, it's definitely a mistake you're not going to make. You know that at the beginning of the project, you have to identify the most important sources of needs and requirements. So we can move to the next example, which is from a bank. I'm just checking if we are, yes. So this is another one where BA, business analysis, was also very important. It happened in a large bank in France. And in this bank, they have a very, very efficient test center with more than 100 people full-time testing, doing some functional testing for the different projects of the company. So the testers are really the best. They are all IQBBA certified senior testers and so on. But the issue is that there are always failures in production, and the test managers know where these failures come from. They mainly come from the low quality of the test basis, the low quality of the specifications provided at the beginning to the test centers. So the manager of the test center wanted to have the right to contribute to the review of the test basis early in the project. Unfortunately, it wasn't allowed. So what have we done? We decided to organize in a very professional way a root cause analysis of the most important failures occurring in production. And the conclusion was so obviously showing that we had an issue with the quality of the test basis that the top level management agreed to change the organization and decided to involve testers and people from the test centers in the review of the requirements, of the high-level requirements, as early as possible in the project. Another example where business analysis can help, so it's going to be the next one. This one happened in a large and small company at the same time. Actually, it was at Electricité de France, EDF, where they had launched a few years ago a small project, a very interesting one, dedicated to an application for final customers to assess, estimate, calculate the price of the electricity they would have to pay at the end of the month. It started with a very, very small team, but the project was so successful that there are more and more customers, and they had to increase the size of the team and to ensure, at the end, a good quality level. Unfortunately, since they started with a small team, after 1 or 2 years, there were about 50 people in the team, and they didn't know who was in charge of what. So to support them, what we decided to do was to create a BPMN model of their organization to describe the current situation. And then we improved this model to modify their current way of working. And this was achieved with this BPMN modeling notation, business process modeling notation. And it was not about providing too much documentation. It was just a couple of diagrams, and it was really very helpful because they had an overview on the main activities, input, output, roles, who is in charge of what, and also we had represented the tools to be used in these processes. So BPMN can help, and again, it's one of the tools a business analyst can use efficiently. The last one, and then I will move forward to other tool. The last one happened in a medical company where the team has to work on a very, very safety critical system. This system was in charge basically of creating drugs and medications for specific diseases. It was very critical. In case of failure, we may have many people dying. So it was very, very critical. They even had in this team 3 testers for 1 developer, which is huge. However, they had a very important issue. They had too many test cases. They had thousands of test cases, and it really took too much time to execute all of them. But they were scared. They thought, well, if we reduce the number of test cases, maybe we'll have more failures in production and we cannot take the risk. So what we decided to do is to use a good old testing method, which is called risk-based testing. And I'm going to show it to you with the next page. So I guess you may be asking yourself, why is Eric talking about risk-based testing? It's a business analysis conference. It's not about testing. However, in this method, basically we have to identify the main risks. And then once we have identified the risk, we have to assess the risk level. And the risk level is based on 2 things, the likelihood of the risk and the impact of the risk if it occurs. And do you know who are the best people to efficiently assess the impact of a risk? It's really the business representatives and the business analysts, because they will be able to identify the risk, and they particularly will be able to know if the features associated to the risk are critical areas, yes or no, if the features associated to the risk are visible to the final users and customers, they will know if the risks are associated to the most used areas of the system, yes or no. So they will have a good assessment of the business importance of the risks. So based on this method, we had found a way to prioritize the test cases execution, to limit the number of test cases, and to add new test cases on the most critical areas. And this was possible thanks to the contribution of the BA. So I'm now going to give a couple of examples regarding the tools you can use. So yes, so we're on the good page. So as I told you, the good news is that there are plenty of tools to be used by the BAs. So this picture, the one with all the tool, is probably, yes, so you have to be on the picture with many tools, the red one. Yes, perfect. Yeah. We are just coordinating with my colleague to be aligned. So this picture shows many tools. So for the BA, I think it's the same kind of thing. You need to have a toolbox with all the possible tools that can be useful for a BA. So since we don't have much time, I'm just going to talk about a couple of tools, about 10 tools. And to make it a bit funny, we're going to do this as a game, as a quiz. So I will be presenting 10 tools. And for each tool, you will have to score yourself. So if you know the tool but don't use it, you will get 1 point. If you know it and use it from time to time, you will get 2 points. And if you know it and use it on a regular basis, you will need 3 points. Okay, so you need a pen, a sheet of paper. I'll let you some time, and then we'll start. Okay, so don't forget 1, 2, or 3 points, depending on your knowledge related to the method or tool. So I'm going to start with a very famous one, which is again part of most of the BA trainings, the personas. So this method is very useful either to identify new requirements specific to particular users of the solution, or to challenge your requirements. If you already have your requirements, you can think about possible types of users that are a bit particular and that this user will need some specific requirements. So for example, we can think about Rachel. Would Rachel be able to use our system as it is specified today? So the personas is really a very, very interesting method. It's widely used in Agile project, but also in sequential project, a very, very important method. So 1 point, 2 points, or 3 points. And I move to the second one. The second one is called 5 Whys. And yes, can move to, yes, the next one. 5 Whys. Yeah, so 5 Whys, very close to another method, which is called the Ishikawa diagram. So this method is very useful either to identify the root cause of a failure or to better clarify, understand a need or an issue at the beginning of a project. And an issue is very, very often a reason why a new project can be launched. So this 5 Whys or Ishikawa fishbone diagram method can be very, very useful to improve your business analysis activities. Next one. So don't forget to get your score, 1, 2, or 3 points. The third method is called Moscow. I'm sure you will all get 3 points on this one, Moscow. And again, I'm sure you're a bit bored with Moscow because you already know it. Why is he talking about Moscow? I'm going to tell you why. Of course, it's very easy to remember the different priority levels when using Moscow, but for me, the most important is to have 4 levels for the priority. Why? Because when you only have 3 levels, when you start hesitating, is it important or not, you will put the medium level. With 4 levels, you have to make a choice between more important or less important. You cannot be in the middle. So that's why it's a very, very good method, and that's why it's really widely used. So that's Moscow. Let's move to the fourth one. The fourth one is called the SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This method is also widely used by the experienced business analysts, either to challenge an idea or a possible solutions, or to compare two possibilities when you have to provide a specific solution. So the SWOT analysis is really, really interesting because you will be asking yourself good questions about the project and about the solution you are thinking about. And what I can tell you basically is that the strengths and weaknesses will be identified internally inside your company, and the opportunities and threats have to be found outside the company. So it's also a good way to be sure to consider the regulations, the competitors, and so on. So that's the SWOT analysis. And again, don't forget to score yourself about this one. So let's move to the fifth method. Again, nothing out of the ordinary. It's a good old modeling method. It's called the use case diagram. So when I started my career a long time ago, I started in a company in charge of editing a tool to create some UML diagrams. And at that time, it was very common to use UML, particularly for the software development. And I must admit that it started to disappear slowly but surely. But it's coming back. And it's clear that the use case diagrams are very, very useful, particularly at the beginning of the project, to quickly get an overview about the expected solution. What do we have on a use case diagram? We are supposed to have the actors, so the different types of users of the expected solutions. We also have, of course, the use cases, corresponding basically to the main functions of the application. And we have associations between the users, the different types of users, and the use cases. So it's about explaining who will be using the solution and why. And it's very efficient at the beginning of the project because it's a good way to have a quick overview on the expected solution. So we can move to the next method or tool or technique. I mentioned it already before when talking about this project in the field of energy. So that's about business process modeling. So this one is not that easy. When you have a look at BPMN diagram, you may have the feeling that it's very easy. However, it's not that easy. And if you want to use BPMN in a professional way, which is very good, you definitely need to be trained against the method itself, but also you need to be trained against the specific tools such as Visagi, Iris Designer, because it's not that easy to guess the meaning of the most important graphical components. However, BPMN is really very, very efficient to design different things. You can design a process cartography at the company level, for example, to show how the processes, ordering, billing, delivery will be coordinating. You can also use the BPMN diagram to describe a specific function, such as how to order an item on an e-commerce website. So it's also a good way to visualize the main activities and the main actors for a specific process. Next one is called the business model canvas. Unfortunately, as you may know, there are many people who have a tendency to consider that having documentation on the Agile project is a loss of time. And when I present the expected content of a normal business case, I'm often told, yes, Eric, that's nice, but we don't have enough time to do a 20 pages or more document. But that's not a good answer because the documentation is very, very important, even on Agile project. The difference is that on Agile, you will try to limit the size of the documentation. And for example, when it's about the business case, which is very important, which is one of the most important deliverables to be created at the beginning of the project, you can use a light business case. And a very famous model is called the business model canvas. It's widely used. You can find many examples, many tools on the internet to do it. Basically, on one page, you will have an overview on the project you plan to launch or you are thinking about to launch. You will have information about the main activities, the value provided by the expected solution, and of course, the cost and benefits. So documentation, even in Agile, can be very useful, and it can be very light and easy to provide. Next one is called invest. So if we have people involved in Agile project in the room, I'm sure they know invest. Invest is a little bit like a checklist to be used to check the quality of a user story. And actually, it could also be used for a requirement, even if to check the quality of a requirement, we have other checklists. So with this invest checklist, we will check that each user story, which is basically an expected feature, we will check that each user story is independent from other user stories, is negotiable, is valuable. Do we have a real added value for the customers, for the final users? We also have to check that it's estimable. Are we able to estimate how much effort will be needed to implement the user story? Is it small enough to be implemented in a short period of time, which is often called a sprint on a Scrum project, for example? It's 4 weeks maximum. Is it small enough? If not, it has to be divided into smaller user stories. And last but not least, is it testable? A user story is more or less equivalent to a requirement. If it's not testable, it means that you will not have a way to check that the delivered feature matches the expectation. So this invest method can be very, very useful, and it's widely used. We can move to the next one, which is basically like an advice. The next one is, well, it's very, very interesting and efficient to describe all the user stories or all the requirements in the same way. I must admit that on the Agile project, it's always the case. If there is one thing which is always applied on an Agile project, it's the use of the user stories and this template as a I want, in order to, or so that. But when you deal with a normal sequential project, it's also very important to be able to define a template that will be used to describe all the requirements in the same way. It's a good way to contribute to the quality level of the requirements and to be sure not to forget important aspects of a requirement. So it's called a template for the user story or for the requirement. So again, 1, 2, or 3 points. And we're going to move to the 10th method or tool, which is about wireframes. So what are we talking about? A wireframe is a bit like a drawing of the expected graphical user interface of a software or an application. It should not be too nice, so that's why it's black and white on this picture. It's a bit like you are drawing on a paperboard. And it's really very, very useful, particularly at the beginning of a project, because it's a good way to show to your customers what the solution could look like. So you will get an early feedback. And it's also a way to validate the solution as early as possible on the project. A big mistake is to wait the final version of the software and the final version of the graphical user interface to present it to the customers. Because in case the customer is unhappy, you will have to unbuild and to rebuild many things in the software. So the wireframes are also one of the most useful tools for the BAs. So what kind of a BA are you? So I hope you managed to follow me, and now you have to calculate your score. If you're not very good in mathematics, you can use a calculator. So 1, 2, or 3 points. And now we're going to show the results. It's a bit like the stupid surveys we do in the psychology magazine when we take the train. So if you scored between 0 and 10, we can conclude that the BA topic is new for you, but it's not an issue. It's good news because there is room for improvement in the field of BA. If you score between 11 and 20, well, we can consider that you have an intermediate level. It means that you are probably able to efficiently work as a BA at the project level, and that's already very good. If you score between 21 and 30, that's really good. We can conclude that you are an experienced BA, a senior BA, and that you are able to work at the company level to define or to improve processes, and also at the project level. And if you scored more than 30, if you scored more than 30, you either cheated or should have used a calculator because the maximum possible was 30. So next step, and I'm close to the conclusion. In this presentation, I wanted to show you firstly that the role of a BA was very, very important on a project. And secondly, that many tools were available to support the daily activities of the BAs. So a next step for you could be to get IQBBA certified. What is IQBBA? It stands for International Qualifications Board for Business Analysis. So it's a non-profit organization involving BA senior experts, and they have defined a scheme to provide knowledge to the BAs together with a way to get an official certificate. So what could be the benefits for you if you're a beginner, if the topic is new for you? It's a good way to learn the basics of business analysis and then to have the possibility to move to this position. It's a very interesting position. For example, you can start as a tester, and then after a couple of months or a year of functional testing, you can try to move to a BA position. It's a very, very interesting position. If you have an intermediate level, it's not bad. So we can move to the next one. Yeah. So intermediate level, it's not bad, but you still have to learn to be more and more efficient. So in that case, thinking about the IQBBA certification will be a very good way to learn more and to increase again and again your BA skills. And if you are in the third category, if you are an experienced BA, it's going to be useful. It's what I tell at the beginning of the training. Even if you don't learn anything in this training, there is an added value for you because the training you will confirm that you have all the most important skills for a BA. And don't forget that with this kind of scheme, you will have a certificate. The certificate may be a very, very good way to make the difference and to get better positions. And getting better position is applicable internally, inside your company. But when you work in a consulting or IT services company, it can also be a good way to make the difference between your competitors. And believe me, the certifications in the field of IT and also business analysis are more and more important. We see them more and more often on the request for proposal, for example. So that's about it for today. Thank you very much for listening to my talk. If you have any question, you can drop me an email. And if we can take a couple of questions right now, it's going to be my pleasure to try to answer.
Well, from my side, I have a couple of questions. If one were to have scored more than 30, it would have been obvious that they had cheated and not used a calculator. But
Yeah, that's a good one, yeah.
what would someone who has who has some knowledge of business analysis and the tools that you've mentioned, but do not have a qualification, what would a person like that need to do to get qualified based off of their already based knowledge?
I think a good option is to have a look at a certification scheme such as IQBBA I mentioned. And a very good thing is that it's not mandatory at all to attend a training to learn more, because on the IQBBA website, for example, you can download a document which is called the syllabus. And in this document, you have a very detailed information about all the methods, all the tools. However, if you want to learn practical things, it may be useful to join a training and to have the opportunity to really practice with different tools.
Thank you so much for your insights. It seems as though business analysis is a up-and-coming certification, and that many people in the future will be taking such courses. Once again, I thank you for your contribution and your session today. Feel free to tune in to any of our other channels, A4Q, GASQ, or ISQI. And remember that the entire stream today is available on Skills Club. Thank you.
Thank you very much.